Welcome back to Next Gen Console Watch, our show following all the news and rumors on the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series. I'm Seth Macy, and I'm joined by Ryan McCaffrey, host of IGN's Xbox podcast, Podcast Unlocked.
Welcome back, Seth.
Why, thank you. It's wonderful to be here. I'm also joined by Jonathon Dornbush, host of IGN's PlayStation podcast, Podcast Beyond. Hello, Jonathan.
What did you do with Damon?
Damon is he's taking a well-deserved Wednesday off, as everyone should do now and then. Wednesdays can be brutal. So, but today we will be discussing why the Xbox Series S and X, PlayStation 5, or even the Nintendo Switch could win 2022. I think you could make a pretty solid argument that based on what we know or think is going to be coming out this year, 2022 is going to be maybe one of the best years in video games in a really long time, with all three major platforms bringing kind of their A plus games this year. Let's start with you, Jonathan. PlayStation, big year coming up for them, right around the corner. Could you walk us through why PlayStation could conceivably win, quote unquote, 2022?
Yeah, I mean, looking forward into 2022, I think it's, of course, worth just saying, especially with these strange times we live in with people still developing from home, hybrid office work from home sort of schedules and things going on, anything could be delayed, anything could change. And so this year could look quite different. But yeah, Seth, as you said, like right now, starting off, the year looks really big across all three platforms. And I think particularly for PlayStation fans right now, most immediately we have coming up Horizon Forbidden West. Horizon Zero Dawn was one of the biggest new franchises on PS4. It sold incredibly, has become this really big juggernaut for them. Aloy was sort of like an instant new PlayStation icon sort of protagonist. And Forbidden West is shaping up to be really, really exciting. It's coming out on February 18th. We might talk a little bit about it more later, but I played 4 hours of it, and it's really, really good. It sort of was everything I was hoping Horizon Forbidden West would do, and that it still kept the foundation and the really excellent base of what they built in Zero Dawn, but just kind of refined everything. And so every little, like nitpick I had about the first game, because there weren't too many major issues with it, but every sort of, this could have been a little better, or this part, this part of combat could have been stronger, this part of exploration could have been, all of that seems to have been addressed and more. So it's shaping up to be really, really good. And then, just a couple weeks after that, Gran Turismo 7 comes out, and it's been a while since the last Gran Turismo entry. Sport was the only one on PS4, and then 6 was even before that. So it's a very big franchise for Sony worldwide. I think sometimes we don't think about it as much, but it's huge for them. And then of course, a little game called God of War Ragnarok.
That old chestnut, yes.
That little fella. A sequel to a particular game I may have reviewed well on IGN in our Game of the Year 2018. Obviously, it has a lot of expectations going into it. It has a brand new director and is building off of what they did from the 2018 God of War. But we got our first look at gameplay last year. I did a few interviews with the new director, and I think I'm really, really confident by sort of the direction they're taking, their thoughts about what they're doing with the sequel, the expectations and the weight of it and whatnot. I think it could be shaping up really well. And so, just if you took those three games together, I think that would be a pretty fantastic year for PlayStation. But we've got third-party exclusives that are coming out, console exclusive wise. You've got Forspoken in May, Ghostwire Tokyo from Tango Gameworks, and potentially things like Final Fantasy 16. We have to hear more, but could be on the horizon. Who knows? And then you get really cool indies that are console exclusive, like Sifu and Chia, Stray, Little Devil Inside. There's a lot of really, really cool stuff coming, and then the potential of things we don't know are definite for this year. We could see PSVR 2 for the holiday, depending on its launch cycle. And we know there's a Horizon game in the works for that. I would hope a new Astro Boy as well. There's potential from Naughty Dog. They've been working on their multiplayer sort of spin-off project from The Last of Us Part 2 when it didn't have multiplayer. They've been working on that for quite some time. That could potentially see a release this year. We've had reports they're working on the Last of Us remake as well. That TV show might be coming out this year as well, so that could line up nicely. And in terms of things we don't quite know are happening, but have heard some reports about, there's also the potential for something I imagine we'll be discussing a lot on the show if it comes to fruition, which is the alleged Project Spartacus from PlayStation, which is sort of their Game Pass competitor. We'll have to see what it actually looks like, what the offerings are, and how that stacks up. It's potentially a very, very exciting packed year, and I think even if a few of those things don't make it, you still are shaping up to be a really solid year, whether you have a PS4 or a PS5. I think you're in a good position no matter what.
Yeah, it's looking like it's shaping up to be a huge year for PlayStation 5, and everybody who managed to get one will be rewarded for their patience. However, on the other side of things, Xbox, Ryan, tell us why Xbox is going to potentially win 2022.
Didn't they already win by buying Activision Blizzard? Is this conversation over? No, it's, obviously, huge acquisition. It will not finalize until 2023. But even without that, it is set up to be another excellent year on Xbox. And the highlight, certainly the big fish in this pond, is none other than Starfield, which is the upcoming role-playing game from none other than Todd Howard and Bethesda Game Studios. It's the first new IP that Todd and his team have done ever, basically, since Elder Scrolls started way back in the 90s somewhere. And it's it's Todd Howard's first game that he is directing since 2015 with Fallout 4. So this thing has been in the works for a long time. We've had a couple of glimpses at it at E3. And it is a sci-fi, space epic, and we don't know much about it yet, but there's a lot to be excited by based on the bits we have seen, and that the fact that they called their shot Babe Ruth style last year and said we're going to be out on 11/11/22. If they actually pull that off, that'll be pretty impressive, especially in this pandemic age, as Jonathan was alluding to. But if they make it, that is going to be a massive, massive exclusive for Xbox. But that's not it. I mean, there are plenty of other games. Probably the next biggest game is, I'm going to say Stalker 2, and then the next one I'll get to, I'll talk about that. But Stalker 2, another first-person shooter here, and this one is a sequel to a beloved game, another one long in the works. It's already been delayed. This was originally scheduled for April 28th. It's been pushed back to December. So a pretty substantial bump back. If it does make December, of course, it still counts as part of this 2022 discussion. So you could be looking at a pretty high impact end of year for Xbox with Starfield and then Stalker 2. But then don't forget about a game that was announced at E3 last year from Arcane called Redfall. We haven't seen it yet. All we have is that cinematic announced trailer, but it's vampires, it's co-op, it's Arcane. That's probably all you need to get excited about that game. So I look forward to learning more about that. Now, the original reveal trailer said summer. If we just factor in automatically some kind of delay, hopefully that still makes it out in the fall. So again, potentially really stacking the fall for Xbox here. But just like PlayStation's got some good third-party and indie stuff, Microsoft's got some lined up as well. If you're a horror game fan, and more people are than ever, horror is such a huge genre, Scorn, which was a game announced, kind of alongside the console itself. We've been waiting on that one. So Scorn, which is that, very alien-esque looking visual aesthetic, a lot of very gross body horror in that game to look forward to. So Scorn's out there. You've got Warhammer 40K Darktide, which, again, 4-player co-op, kind of melee first-person combat. That could very well be a hit as well. You've got Arc 2 maybe in there. That was a Game Awards announcement that blew up big time. We'll see if that sneaks out in 2022. A game that should definitely be hitting very soon, because it's scheduled for March, is Tunic, which is the absolutely adorable, but also just gorgeous, visually speaking, Zelda-like, where you play an adorable fox with a sword. And that we've had a couple of playable demos for that one pop up here and there in limited time fashion. So that's coming up finally after a long wait. You've got Crossfire X, which is the multiplayer sort of Counter-Strike-ish first-person shooter that's been in development for quite a while. You got a free-to-play multiplayer, but then you've got a full-on single-player campaign for that first-person shooter that's being made by Remedy, the developers of our 2019 IGN Game of the Year, Control. So that's coming right up in just a few weeks, actually. Don't forget Shredders, for those of you who are SSX and Amped fans, little snowboarding action coming at you as an Xbox exclusive. You've got Somerville, which if that makes this year, that's going to probably be right near the top of my list because that is some former developers of Limbo and Inside. So stay tuned for that one.
Games,
yeah. With that one, we had a trailer for at E3 last year, and it just jumped out. It separated itself, as did Replaced. If you guys remember that one, that was one of the breakout stars from Xbox's E3 this past year. I mean, that's shaping up to be a pretty nice 2022. Again, if even most of that makes it, assuming there will probably be some of it that pushes out past this year, but should be a good time in Xbox land in 2022.
I think we're in a great spot as far as where these consoles are. There's something always exciting about when a new generation sort of finds its footing and starts to really take off. But there's also something very exciting about a console that is sort of nearing the end of its cycle. And we don't officially know that the Nintendo Switch is nearing the end of its cycle, but it's 5 years old now. They almost certainly have a Switch Pro. If it's not going to be announced this year, it's like in deep development. And because it is 5 years and everyone knows how to get the most out of that machine, we have a great year for Nintendo. If they didn't release anything else, now we've got Arceus coming out this week. We've got Kirby coming out in March. We've got Bayonetta. I can't recall off the top of my head. But if they didn't release any of those games and only released Breath of the Wild 2, I would say that is kind of all they need. There's 101 million Nintendo Switches in people's homes now. Yeah, it just passed the PlayStation 1 for all-time sales. It's knocking on the door of the PlayStation 4. Zelda is, I believe, this is arguable, and you can argue with me, but I'll tell you that you're wrong. Breath of the Wild is the greatest game ever. That's my personal opinion. And from what we've seen of the second one and how long they've been working on it, I have no doubt in my mind that it's going to exceed the first as far as scope and just storytelling and things that you can do and just excitement. And I am looking forward to it more than any other game. Okay, maybe Starfield, but Breath of the Wild. And I think that's going to help Nintendo, especially because Nintendo has something that none of the others have. And they snuck marketing into a quarter of the Switch owners' homes through Super Smash Brothers. So whether or not you're a Zelda fan or not, if you own Super Smash Brothers, you're like, hey, I recognize that strange little elf boy and the girl with the dress on. So I think 2022, even if we didn't have any other games coming out, there's also like indie games like Sea of Stars, which I absolutely cannot wait for. But if we didn't have any of that and we only had Breath of the Wild 2, it would be Nintendo's best year ever. And that's all from me. I'm geeking out. Jonathan, you have some doubts as to whether or not Breath of the Wild is going to come out this year, but that's okay. I forgive you. You're allowed
it's just a gut feeling, and I'd like to be wrong, but just on the way release dates and things tend to be phrased.
Yeah.
And certainly I think the way that we've seen the pandemic hit Nintendo in particular, I could potentially see it slip to sort of a spring launch, which, coming around the anniversary of Breath of the Wild 1 is not a bad thing to do with Zelda. They do love, cyclical nature of things. But I do think even without Breath of the Wild, it would still be a very, very solid year for the Switch based on just what we know right now. Even one you didn't mention, is probably one of my most anticipated games this year, the Mario and Rabbids sequel. Sparks of Hope. I loved that first game.
Such a good game.
It really, really surprised me in a lot of ways. And I wasn't even a big strategy person before it. And I sort of realized my love of strategy through that, which was a weird one. But I'm excited to see what that team does with more of an expanded kind of take.
And speaking of Mario, I mean, Mario and Zelda, both Odyssey and Breath of the Wild, both shipped in the same year. What is the mainline Mario team up to? I gave Odyssey a 10 for IGN, which I stand by to this day.
Yeah.
I want the next mainline Mario. So I wonder, I can't imagine it will be released this year since it's not even announced, but maybe I'll get lucky and we'll get at least an announcement of what of the main Mario team's up to this year.
We could have it for 2025 on our Switch 2.0s.
It'll be worth the wait, I'm sure.
Yeah.
All Nintendo needs to do for me is just put Wind Waker on Switch, and I'll be happy for the year, to be honest.
Yeah, I would love that very much. But now you get my heart beating. But speaking of beating hearts, would you tell us a little bit about the exciting time that you had? That was such a bad segue, and I apologize. I'm not Damon, but would you please tell us a little bit about your Horizon preview? You played 4 hours.
Well, I mean, it's fair to say the machines don't have those hearts. So
That's true.
We can tie it all together. No, yeah. Excuse me. I played 4 hours of Horizon Forbidden West, early portions of the game. You can check out our full preview on IGN. There's a written and video preview. We also have some sort of light gameplay comparisons of how it's evolved from Zero Dawn that Mark Medina on our team helped put together. And then also sort of a details piece where if you just want the straight facts of what I saw and not my thoughts on it, you can go check out that piece as well. But there's really a lot to talk about. One of the biggest takeaways that I have from it is just that I think this is sort of the promise of Zero Dawn really fulfilled. Zero Dawn was a spectacular start for a franchise, but it had things it could do better here and there. Some of the conversations could be a little stilted. Animation could be a little bit stiff in here or there. I think one of the biggest complaints for a lot of people was sort of the limitations of the exploration. I probably am not the only person who kind of brute forced my way over a lot of mountains just to get to a point rather than having to find a very specific handhold to jump up. Luckily, exploration is much more free this time. There are a lot more places you're able to grab onto, a lot of places you're able to climb up and shimmy down. You have new new exploration tools, like the polecaster, which is kind of like this really great grappling hook that will pull you into higher or further away points, as well as the shield wing, which is a very Zelda-like glider, but it's very handy and very useful. And using all that stuff in conjunction is just so fluid and so smooth. I think a thing that I would say to people who are maybe seeing the gameplay and are like, well, it looks like Horizon. Like the world doesn't seem shocking in a way. I think it's the level of detail that you see. That really is what stunned me, especially after playing for a few hours. You see... Sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna ask you, it's kind of hard to see from even like our videos. How does it look in person? Like what are the graphics look amazing just on like my computer screen or on my phone. And I want to know how they look for you, like experiencing the game.
I was playing on a TV on a in-dev build, so it wasn't the final build or anything, but it was on a PS5 I was playing. And yeah, it looked gorgeous. And I think the thing to say about it is, I think looking at the gameplay, you can be like, oh, well, it's, a similar color palette or similar domain as we've seen for some of the lands in Horizon Zero Dawn. This portion that I played is very early in the game. It was right past essentially the opening credits. So you're still very much in similar land to where you were previously. But I do think, you take a look at the way the foliage moves and the variety of the foliage as it is. A big thing they're working on is settlements and making them more interesting and making these towns that pop up a lot more intriguing for the player to explore. And I think just we have a comparison sort of this first settlement and some settlements from Horizon Zero Dawn. And Zero Dawn settlements tend to be a couple of houses, maybe a few NPCs standing in a position and not really moving around. Here, there's so many more people moving around. They're doing different things. Their animation cycles are much more different. They're behaving in different ways. You can go into a brewery in this first settlement, and there's just so much life of people at tables sharing drinks or laughing at stories or, chefs behind the counter cooking things. And it's so much more life to it. And I think it really brings you into that world in a wonderful way that,
Excellent.
Sometimes with Horizon Zero Dawn, I think it was more about the machines and sort of the majesty of the scope. But here, I think it has that and then that finer detail too that really, really makes it all sing. So
you are selling me on this game. I am really excited. I think the best open world games are the ones that don't care whether or not you're there. And if what you're saying, sounds like people are just doing their thing in the background. So very, very excited. Check out that preview on IGN.com. We have quite a bit of coverage. It's very exciting. It's very good stuff. So thank you for sharing that with us, Jonathan. Let's get to the results of last week's poll, which was, does the Activision acquisition make you want an Xbox? 35.5% said no, sticking with Sony. 25.1% said yes, exclamation point. That's a critical piece of punctuation there. 23.4 said no, already have Game Pass. And 16% said no, sticking with PC, which that's a lot of PC players out there. Good for you. I'm happy to hear it. All right, we have a new poll, which you can go to the IGN homepage to vote in. Who is going to have the most exciting year? PlayStation, Nintendo, or Xbox? We'll find out next week. So that will do it for this edition of Next Gen Console Watch. Thank you, Ryan and Jonathan. We'll be back next Friday at 6 a.m. Pacific, 9 a.m. Eastern with more PS5 and Xbox Series X news. We will see you then. Well, not me, but somebody will.